Is that everything look good on your end for
Everything
it?
looks
Good.
great. Looks fantastic.
Perfect. All right.
We're
Awesome.
recording, so whatever you want to start.
Okay. My name's Stephen Davis. I am the Director of Fine Arts and Worship at Strongrock Christian School. We're in Locust Grove, Georgia. And I have been directing theater now for going on 18 years, both director, technical director, been on stage, off stage, and have seen everything there is to know about theater and enjoyed the process. And so that's a little bit about myself.
Yeah, cool. Well, Stephen, let's back up a little bit here. For you, what were some of your earliest memories of theater in your life?
Well, I started doing theater in ninth grade. I played Friedrich in Sound of Music for our first musical my freshman year. The great thing about it, I had a mom that would not let me play football. So I had to decide what I was going to be able to do. We didn't have the insurance, and so the result was I saw a flyer on a bulletin board that said Drama Club is starting to meet on Wednesday nights.
Yeah.
So I showed up. I met the drama director and asked her if I could be a part of it as a freshman. She said yes, and pretty much have been invested in theater since that moment right there.
So you started out mostly performing, or?
Yeah, I was performing both in one-act competitions. I was performing in, just stage productions and plays. And then I moved on to a more, it kind of advanced into more of the musical role. And then I went into technical theater. I had the privilege of being connected to a performing arts center in Clayton County who ran a theater technology class at the end of the day. So I left my school, drove during my 7th period class, and took that class every single day for 2 years. And so that's really where I got a love and passion for technical theater. Realized I love being off stage more than I love being on stage. And I love the opportunity just to kind of build some leadership gifts that I felt like I had to be able to bring those involved in that type of production and that type of movie.
Sure. Were there some things even that early on in technical theater that you were really excited about specifically?
I was a sound, AV, and lighting guy. That was kind of my passion. Sound, because there's, basically it's just the stress of it. And I like the pressure. I don't know why, but, show week, you're crying. And by the end of the week, you're just saying, we did it, and I think that constant feeling that you were able to accomplish something. I love lighting. And the reason why I love lighting is because you have the opportunity to do these subtle things to help bring a scene come to life, make it come to life.
Yeah.
And people don't know what's happening, but without it, there's a mood that's being lost, or there's something that just didn't quite make it. Attending Georgia Thespian Conference last year, I saw a production called Miraz, and the whole thing opened up with this sepia tone lighting. And it gave that depiction of the time period, and it just set you right where it needed to be. And that kind of stuff just gets me really excited. So seeing that and emulating that stuff, and also bringing my own kind of, flair into some things, it's pretty exciting. And that's what I really, get passionate about.
Yeah. When you even say, your own flair, like what are some shows or things that you've seen that really inspire you from a lighting perspective?
That's a good question. I would say, lighting wise, again, I think that show was called Miraz, and it was just the creating the tone. There was a recent show, and I've never seen it before. It was a bluegrass show. And I saw it last year. First time I ever even been introduced to this show. But again, it took place in the hills of Kentucky, and basically the lighting, the sunshine. Basically, it was a lot of lighting where it felt like the sun was seeping in throughout the whole time. So you kind of had this feeling of Kentucky mountain light shining through trees, kind of feeling the entire time. I love doing Oklahoma because it gives you that nice amber where you're creating this mood of this constant kind of farm look, but gives you that. Those ambers and those greens really makes life come to life. Of course, you got shows like Wicked, who, when you watch those shows, what they not only do with light, but what they do with outside tech, as well as just some of the what's the word I'm looking for? Just ultimate stage components where they try things that are not being used. I could tell you a show that I had fun with when I directed Beauty and the Beast. That was a fun show, not only to do with lighting, because of course you have the scene where the beast transforms. Right. So you have a lot to do with lighting there and fog. But I like in the very beginning, in the opening scene, we tried a silhouette scene in the very beginning. So we brought the screen out, we put backlighting in, and we made it like a storybook introduction, and with kind of a storybook. We let the screen kind of be a storybook looking prop, and then we pull the backlighting in, and then you saw this transformation of the beast as a silhouette with the witch also transformed. Right. So it allowed us to do that with just one simple light and a screen. Wow. And so stuff like that, where there's simplicity, but it creates a whole new dynamic. It's pretty fun.
That's really cool. Now, when you're sitting down to just start the planning stages for a new show, talk a little bit about what that process is like for you. I mean, do you go sit in a coffee shop and just listen to music and start to dream on paper? Or like, what is your kind of process or routine? I mean, after doing it for 18 years, I'm sure you found some things that work for you.
Well, you do need quiet, and you need time just to kind of ponder and think. The first process, obviously, is to read the script and start jotting your ideas with a cold read, and already kind of get a mindset of what the stage is going to look like from there. Then you know kind of what you're wanting to do. And then I get the opportunity. I have a wonderful job, people that invest in me to be creative. By being the director of arts and worship, I have time in my office every day where I can just utilize that time, maybe 30 minutes, and sometimes maybe 45 other days, depending on my schedule, where I get to designate that time, lock the door, and just be research. And that's the most valuable time I could ever have. And so, being a computer, I get a lot of creative ideas just what's out there. I say, hey, I think we could do something similar. We can't afford that, obviously, but we can do something that can make it create that same effect or feel. I go to a lot of conferences, both in theater and also in the worship side of things. And, worship ministry has become really, really ingrained in lighting and sound. And so that has also been something where I get involved in Facebook groups on how people are using creative arts in their services on Sunday. We utilize that in our chapel services on Tuesday. So we're using lighting weekly. And so I have to have that time to be creative, to set up, help the kids facilitate and say, okay, what do you think if we tried this? And so they have wonderful ideas of letting the lighting mirror what we're putting on the screen and making sure that it's complement. And so just little things like that, but having that time where I can just brainstorm. I'll give you an example. Last year we met you at the Georgia what was it? The
EdCon.
EdCon, sorry. Yeah, that was the first time I've ever attended. And so the Georgia EdCon was a great conference. And so meeting you there, we were already decided that we were going to do Little Mermaid this year. And I had no clue, being an open stage gymatorium, we were going to create the difference of scenes. We're used to creating one backdrop and letting that be the scenery, creating the lighting underneath it to kind of give the change by using lighting to help us give different times of day. And then of course the three-dimensional props to help us, change it around. But when you're dealing with a show that has you under the sea and then, out above the ocean in a castle, I was stumped. And then I went to your class and it talked about, budgetary wise, how you can make this projection idea reality. And I'd already seen it on Broadway. And I saw the opportunity through going on a Disney cruise. I saw a lot of LED screens and a lot of projections that were used when they did Beauty and the Beast on the Disney cruise ship. Was blown away, thought this could never be a reality for us at Strongrock because of budget and because of just the venue we're in.
Right.
And when I went to your conference, kind of got an idea of what was going to take place. So in August, our production was in May of the next year. From August to May, literally, that's what I was doing. How do we create this atmosphere where we're doing multiple scenes, creating that multiple backdrop in a place where we're so limited? And it was really neat to see the doors open up and people wanting this to be a reality for us as well. And the end result was we were just blown away, and our kids blown away by the effect of what we were able to accomplish with it. So it starts. We're already started looking ahead for next year. So the brainstorming is already beginning for a new year for 3 shows that we're set up for, both one act competition, middle school shows, and then our next year's spring musical.
That's exciting. Well, since you mentioned it, I think, you're one of the first people I've talked to outside of professional theater, professional ballet who's really started to delve into the LED screens. In fact, that's so interesting too, even you just saying that this was kind of your first venture into using digital imagery, but you went right into the LED screens instead of just doing what a lot of people do, which is using whatever projectors they have available or whatever they can get their hands on. Can you just kind of almost paint a picture of that process for you, of even entertaining the idea of using an LED screen? And then like, how did you take that idea and then make that a reality in a high school setting?
Sure. Well, I'll tell you, it was kind of a short of a miracle that it worked out for us. I was introduced to a guy that lived in a neighborhood near our school who actually ran a business that did rigging. And so through meeting him, he had a contact and said, ultimately wanted to be to basically support a school. And so I met the right person at the right time. And so networking is number one. I'll say that to anybody. The more you network, the more you get involved, and the more that you showcase, what your kids are doing and how excited you are to be able to bring them to light and let people know what your obstacles are. Don't be ashamed of the fact that you have limitations, because when you tell people you have limitations, you get the best ideas. People come to you and say, hey, you could try this, or what about do this? Or I know a guy, and then you pick up the phone and call and you're thinking, well, this will never happen. And, but we sell ourselves short with that kind of stuff. And so this gentleman was a great man. His name, Bob Daniel. And we met for, he does rigging for, basically anything that's in Mercedes-Benz Stadium. And any event that's outside of there, he does graduations. And so he said he would rig our gym through our trust system to be able to hold a LED screen. And he knew a guy that down in Macon that owed him a favor and wanted us to have the LED screen. And so we thought, okay, we'll do something small. And then he presented a 24 by 14 LED screen, which blew us away, and at a fraction of the cost, and all because there was support behind the arts, seeing schools do something bigger than what they were able to produce. And so the other option, so we were, let me, I guess, go back a little bit, because I probably told you more than you asked for, but
this is great.
We were going with the projector idea. In fact, I think I reached out to you after your conference a couple of times and said, hey, how do we make this work? I don't have a budget for an 8,000 lumen projector. And so I could probably produce about a 3,500 to 5,000. You had great advice and said, 5,000 is the very least that you can do with projections. So more and more, as we were discovering, this was going to be a difficulty. And then there's a church that meets on our campus that rents our gym, and they were getting ready to put in an 8,000 lumen projector on our main screen that we have at our school, which is also about 24 by 14 feet on the gym stage. And they were going to provide it if we were let them use the screen, and we had total access to it. And I mean, just little things that were coming together for us that we just thought, we're supposed to do the show this year. We're supposed to have this opportunity to be able to showcase this projection idea. Things were just coming into place. But the lens size and what we needed the thing that led us to LED and really kind of going, how do we get out of this projection model? We couldn't do rear projection. Our stage has no depth whatsoever. So I began to research multiple projectors, triple head to go kind of, and Pro Presenter were the models we were using to be able to make this work. And the more and more I researched with companies like Full Compass and other companies that sell projection, they were telling me more and more the best they could probably get for us is about 8 to 10 feet rear projection. Well, that takes up about 3/4 of our stage because we have to build a stage extension to extend already. And we had quite a big cast that we're going to be dancing. So my stomach dropped and I thought, okay, projection is not going to work for us. We need something that we can that needs to be projected through. And then we went through the LED process and we found a guy that made it affordable for us. And it was, believe it or not, I didn't think we would be able to afford it, but through some ad sales and people, again, supporting the arts, we were able to purchase it within a week, be able to rent the cost within a week because we were telling people what we were doing. And it's something that schools don't get the opportunity to do. And this would be great for our kids. And so people stepped up to the plate and make it happen.
Yeah. So, what are some of the things? Oh, that's fantastic. Do you, what do you think as you started to use that screen, like, were there things that you noticed even about that technology that were strengths of it, weaknesses of it, things that you liked, things that you didn't like, or maybe even just like from the lens of, if you did it again, with an LED screen, like, what would you adapt or change, just kind of knowing what you know now about that technology?
Well, I will tell you, hands down, over projection, it is. It's just a great tool because now I learned a lot because I did a lot of research between both. Because again, we were looking how to rent these. I was researching companies, and they are very expensive to rent. So you just have to find the right company that's local and see what they can do to help make that happen. Because if it's sitting there, I think they want to rent their stuff as well. And so what I learned, obviously, are pixels are a big deal.
Mm-hmm.
And so the further away your pixels are from each other, the further back the audience has to be in order to get a great image.
Right.
And right now, I believe when the whole LED craze started, each LED light was about 15 millimeters apart on the screen, somewhere around that area. The screen that we rented had the LED lights are about 10 millimeters apart.
Mm-hmm.
So we still had to put the audience a little bit further back in order to get that broad image and make sure it wasn't pixelated what they were looking at.
Right.
I know now there are companies that make them I think the smallest is about 3 to 3.5 millimeters.
Oh my gosh.
Wow. So the HD around what you're able to accomplish through that, the clarity of image. And I'll tell you, when we use the Little Mermaid castle projection that you guys have, I did a test run with it. We finally got it all set up. These were rented off, obviously often. So I would say it's one of the drawbacks where you could sometimes see some of the lines in the projection because you're putting in multiple squares.
Right.
And sometimes the squares aren't tightened where they need to be because they've been overly used. So they probably got stripped a little bit in the process. And so you may see a little bit of a thin line throughout an image every now and then. Right. But for the most part, the clarity of the image was just insane. And so with a screen that big, obviously, again, the further away you go, the clearer the picture. And I will say that with the image, I used the castle construction for Little Mermaid as a tester, and I wanted to unveil that to our students once we had it all set up. So I had that in my program of ProPresenter ready to go. Called the students in from going through their rehearsal in another room. So they came into the gym. It was ready to go, and I had it all black on the LED. And when they came in, I said, "All right, guys, here's your first scene of the Little Mermaid." And I hit play. And when that scene came up, the clarity of that image, the animation moving behind with the water, and then I think what I loved about that image, just the different dimensions you did in that picture, the layers that you had, just created this beautiful picture. And our students actually started crying. I mean, it was just so breathtaking when they looked at it. I had about 4 or 5 of them, just tears going down their face, saying, "This is going to just really accent what we're doing." And so that was a cool moment and something that I will always cherish because, again, it's about them. It's about making them look great. We're told all the time because we're in a gym, we're not a performing center, we can't do certain things. And I always try to remind them, I said, because we don't have it doesn't mean we have to limit ourselves in theater. We got to do with what we have. I mean, there are theaters that are in little small black box warehouses, that are putting on phenomenal productions because they don't let themselves be limited by the space.
Yeah. Where do you see it going from here? I mean, as you look at where the technology is at now, like where are you, what are you dreaming about? Like, what can you envision kind of even for your own program in the future?
Well, I think next year we're toying with the idea of Sister Act. So my brain, just tell you, you asked about how my brain works with brainstorming. So naturally, I'm thinking, how do we turn the lights of Las Vegas into stained glass windows? I mean, that's my brain right now. Okay, so we're in a nightclub. We have the stained glass windows in the church. How do we transform that image? So already now I'm thinking we don't need a huge 24 by 14 LED screen to make this a reality. We need smaller, elongated panels and give the imagery of light that comes through it, and then transition that into to this really, kind of abstract look of stained glass window in the background, and changing those scenes very quickly. You can also create movement between each little screen. And so to me, it'd be a really neat idea to, break up the screens, put it in a way where you can see movement through all four of them and create this moving animation. And it creates that look of people moving into a different place or moving into a different scene. I will tell you, it's really hard to have an LED screen that big, and people say, how are you going to top that? And so already your brain has to go, well, I can't afford that every year. So I got to think about what we can do and what we can afford. So my brain goes into, okay, what's going to be the thing that we do? Every year there's been something that just has kind of got the audience and kind of been breathtaking. And they go, wow, that was neat. I can't believe a school was able to do that. With Beauty and the Beast, I told you it was the silhouette things, the transitions we did through fog and lighting, and the reality, kind of creating that separate reality within that. With Into the Woods, we created this massive tower for Rapunzel. And it was kind of the focal point in the entire show. It created this dynamic of where we were and created that fantasy land. But the tower was huge. And then this year, the LEDs and the projections together, along with we had an aerial list for the first time in a show. And to be able to do that in a gym is pretty amazing. So our students are willing to step up to the plate and do some fun things. And so it's been great having a school that's been supporting us to be able to do it too. So.
Yeah. If a teacher, maybe specifically a high school teacher or a director, came up to you and they're super psyched about being able to use digital imagery through projection, through LED, like what would be some starting tips now that you've done this that you would give them, just to help them get rolling with using this kind of imagery in their shows?
Well, I think you gave me some great pointers, and I'll kind of, lay those back out. One, the size of your projector and the amount of lumens that you need in order to do it. Because again, if you're not in a dark space that can produce an image that's worth looking at, then it doesn't need to be done because it'll be a distraction of your show. So I think your advice of the 5,000 lumens or more is important. We had a 5,000 lumen projector, and I think you maybe saw this in some of the pictures I sent you, in a side screen. So we still did a rear projection on a side screen that we had whenever we used Ursula. So Ursula had her own stage. So there was a pretty nice size screen behind her that created the layer, and we also used that for above the ocean scene, and so it kind of created a different space. So we were able to take a projector that literally was sitting around after the church installed theirs. We had that projector that was in our ceiling that we took and repurposed it and did rear projection off a truss for that scene in the wing.
Yeah.
And we had plenty of space to do the rear projection because it was off the stage and did a side stage. So ultimately, I would say that you have the right materials and that you have the budget to kind of look into that. Research projections and see what's going to be best for your show. And just know, and I'll tell you, and again, I think I told you through an email, I researched a lot of different companies, even the company we were purchasing the show from or renting the show from. And by far, I think the professional look of what you're producing is pretty amazing. Again, I think the layers that you're creating, the animations are subtle. They're not distracting. And then I think that's another point for teachers. You can do still imagery, for certain things.
Right.
Les Poissons, we did a still kitchen, but when we wanted Ariel to swim, we did that nice dark blue ocean and the subtle waves at the top, and so it really was a kind of a neat effect. So ultimately, I guess going back there, first and foremost, you look and see if you can get the materials that you need, and if you have the budget to do it. If not, start selling ads right away. That is a plus. Know what you're going to do as far as doing that. I had this crazy idea. Because we still had a little bit of money left over. So I had our students auction off our show posters. And so we had those in the budget. We paid for those. And we ended up making $800 off 4 posters that were signed by the cast. And again, I didn't get up there because I know if I got up there as a director, everybody would look at me and, crickets. But our students got up there and said, "Hey, this was their chance for our backstage crew to shine." They actually grabbed them and came out front and said, our stage manager did, and said, "Hey, we got these great things," and they began to make a show out of it. Every show they wanted to up their game a little bit,
right?
To get involved in. So already that covered more than enough of the cost of projections we purchased through your company just by selling those posters. And so it was really neat to see it all come together, and where we were able to. It's not that far-fetched dream of saying, I don't think we can do this. This is stuff that Broadway does. This is stuff that professional theaters do. It really is through research and through finding, again, through that networking of people and going to the right places. It's really not that hard of a plan. You can do rear projection. You can do front projection, depending on where you're located and what kind of lens you have. And if you do have the luxury of being able to find an LED screen or somebody who has one, or are fortunate to purchase one, that would be better. It really does allow for. It's very simple. I was really nervous about using the LED, thinking it would be very complicated, and it was just a secondary monitor. Same thing I do when I extend my desktop. And so I ran a massive HDMI cable with a booster from the back room to the to our booth, and taped the cord down, and we had no problems with running about 100-foot cable. It created the space we needed. I would say the program that you run matters. PowerPoint is not the answer, just because of glitches and times in which it'll be slow based on the resolution that you have in the pictures. Yeah. So I would say we were ProPresenter worked very, very well with what we did. It allowed us to have those nice transitions, those smooth transitions between each image. We also ran from some video through it, and we're able to mark every scene and use every scene mark and basically address it in a playlist. So we knew, all right, this is scene one, this is act one, scene one. And so we already had it labeled at act one, scene, 1B. And so it allowed us to know when those marks were there in our playlist. All we had to do was hit play, and the images would come up. So it was very user friendly, and our students knew how to run it smoothly. So,
wow.
That's probably awesome. I think that's a lot of stuff.
I think that's fantastic. I think that you're touching on a lot of different things that I think people are curious about. And I don't think it'll surprise you to hear that when I go to conferences, especially the ones where I'll set up an exhibit or something and I have people come by the table and they just have questions, they're all fascinated about the idea of using projections. They're seeing them more, they're becoming more of the fabric of scenic design as opposed to just an accessory. It's something that they're seeing in other shows. And they get excited about the prospect of closing that gap, like you talked about, between what they're seeing on Broadway and what you can do in a high school show. But the next question is, how do I get started? Because my space is so challenging and unique, and I'm working in a gymatorium, and can I do it there? And so I think anything that we can do to I think some of it's education, but some of it's just empowering people and giving them the encouragement to just try it, because as you know, you can do tons of research on the internet, but until you just put an image up in your space and take a look and see, react to it. Is that bright enough? Is that colorful enough? Does that work for what we need? But once you get over that hump, then people are generally so encouraged and they just build and iterate from there. So
absolutely. And you talked about the pitfalls of using LED and projection. We were worried about the projections being too dim. We used the LED. It was way too bright. And so thankfully there is a setting on the box that you plug the LED in and the component that it runs through that allows you to dim it down. And so here you got two dynamics, two separate ends of the spectrum. And so you have to decide what's going to be a level that's, again, not distracting. I'll just tell you, hands down, we have to set up one backdrop, and it takes us forever to set up through a pulley system that we handmade and created. Got that idea off again through one of the workshops at Thespian Conference. And so taking good notes and utilizing it, saying, okay, we can make this work. But our life was just so much, easier going through this idea of projection, and looking at the drawbacks and how much it costs us to rent even just one, backdrop.
Right.
It really, we had multiple projections for the price of one backdrop that we rent. And then, of course, we have to fold that thing up, get it back to the company. And this is something that we have, on site, that we have in our hands. It's tangible, and we have multiple scenes to work with. I think going back to that question, that you asked before, what are some things that could make it, what do teachers need? It doesn't matter about the space that you're in, but it does matter about the projection and the lumens. It matters what program you're using to be able to show your images. Shadows matter when you look at a projection. So rear projection is, if you're using projectors, rear projection is I would say is the go-to. And then finally, I would say that just make sure what you're putting up there is not a distraction to the kids. That's most important, because if it doesn't complement what the kids are doing, it doesn't need to be up there. And I can see, just like lighting in multiple shows, become a hindrance, and they become a distraction. So if it's not a compliment, no, all it takes is just some little subtle movement to create this atmosphere. But I will tell you, from hanging up one standard, just flat backdrop, and having something that has movement in the background, it's just a game changer when you're trying to create a scene for students to be a part of. When you're on that ocean scene and you're moving to a storm, or this massive storm is happening behind you, when you're on a boat, it's just, it totally changes the dynamic of what, of that scene and how it should look. And so our students were able to feel more like they were there in that very environment. So the reality of what they're doing becomes more real. And so, those are kind of just some suggestions I think that are very important to directors if you're looking at doing this and going down that road.